And now to Quebec. This week, the Canadian province announced plans for wide-ranging legislation aimed at keeping religion out of the workplace. It's called the Quebec Charter of Values. And if this measure is passed, it would include a ban on state employees from wearing overt religious symbols. Now, that can be anything from Muslim headscarves and Jewish yarmulkes to Christian necklaces donning the sign of the cross. It's a move that has ignited fierce debate about religious freedom. Critics argue that the laws are an attack on freedom of worship and multiculturalism. However, supporters of the measure say the bill would help treat everyone equally by ending special treatment for the religious at work and enforcing secularism. I was joined earlier by Jacob Remes, a William Lyon Mackenzie King Research Fellow at Harvard University's Canada program, to discuss this proposal and its chances of becoming a law in the near future. I first asked him to talk about Quebec and its history of rejecting religious interference.
Quebec famously was, for a very long time, a very religious province. It was roughly run by a combination of conservative nationalist politicians and the Catholic Church for much of the 20th century. But in the 1960s, there was something called the Quiet Revolution, and Quebecers very much turned away from the church and became a very secular society, much more on the lines of what we think of as Republican France. So now Quebec very much defines itself as a secular society, but one with a long Catholic tradition. So
what's interesting is that supporters say that this would end special treatment of the religious at work. What kinds of special treatment are they referring to here?
Well, primarily they mean the special treatment to present themselves as individuals in a way that civil servants often don't. So one of the Quebec ministers said recently that that in no other way were civil servants allowed to express their opinions. They couldn't say things politically. They couldn't play loud music while they were at work. So why should religion be one special place where civil servants could express themselves, could try to tell other people their personal views? But really, what is being regulated here is dress. It's wearing a headscarf. It's wearing a veil. It's wearing a yarmulke. It's wearing a turban. So it's wearing a large cross. So if that is special treatment because you can do that, but you can't wear a political pin, then it's special treatment, I suppose.
Well, can you explain the government's argument that wearing religious symbols makes the government less inclusive?
Sure. So the argument is coming from a tradition that Quebec picks up that really comes from France, where the idea is that the government should be a 100% neutral space, that civil servants, bureaucrats should be simply organs of the state, and that if somebody is wearing a headscarf or wearing a yarmulke, that is imposing a view from another institution into the government, into the state, and that someone who is secular or someone who is of a different religion might feel uncomfortable working with that civil servant, or might be, especially if that civil servant is in a position of power. So one of the really key questions is, should teachers be allowed to wear religious symbols? Should prison guards be allowed to wear religious symbols?
Well, critics argue that the bill allows for a lot of Christian traditions, allowing, for instance, for Christmas trees in public places. Also, interestingly, there are crosses on the Quebec flag and a crucifix in their voting chambers. Can you explain how this inconsistency really fits into the mindset that went into producing this charter?
Well, the argument that the government makes is that these are historical symbols, that the crucifix that's in the National Assembly is a recognition of Quebec's historical roots, historical Catholic roots, that the flag, which has one cross in the middle, and then four fleur-de-lis, which is a Christian symbol representing the Trinity and the Virgin Mary, that those are representations from Quebec's history, and that they are understood in a secular way now. I think it's a little bit hard to imagine how a crucifix would be understood by anyone other than a Christian as a purely secular symbol. I think that most Jews or Muslims or Sikhs or Hindus or atheists would see that as a pretty religious symbol. But that's the argument.
Very interesting. Well, let's talk about how difficult this is actually going to be. I mean, will it pass? Do you think something like this will pass?
Well, if I had to guess, I would say that something will pass. The Parti Québécois, the ruling party, is a minority government right now. But what is between them, the difference between them and a majority, is another party called the CAQ, which translates to the Coalition for Quebec's Future. The CAQ has said that they think that this charter, as proposed, is going too far. But that they want something, that they want rules against teachers and prison guards and other people of authority from wearing religious symbols. But that there's room for compromise, that maybe daycare workers and hospital workers should be allowed to wear religious symbols, or that certain institutions, like certain municipalities or even particular schools, could exempt themselves. So I would suspect that there's going to be some sort of compromise position, and then I would suspect that there's going to be a long, drawn-out court battle over this.
Well, we definitely are going to keep our eyes peeled to see what happens with this. Jacob Remes, a research fellow at Harvard University, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Take care.